Supposing you have a squad of swimmers to train and you want to design a good session. You might be able to work from a recipe, but you won't really know what you're doing. One of the things you'll want to include will be a conditioning set. Again, you can work from a recipe. That can be fairly effective, but if you really want to understand what's happening, if you want to track what your swimmers are doing, how they are performing, deciding what little changes you might have to do along the way, it helps to understand the physiology. And that's what this is about. Physiology. This video is about explaining the physiology of sports swimming in particular. Now, part one, which is this video, concentrates mostly on the muscle composition. Part two concentrates mostly on the energy sources. As I'll explain later, that's fairly dense sort of stuff to try to understand. I've tried to make it understandable by developing this diagram here. You can see there are three lines to it. This has been my main innovation, which has been to line up some images representative of various sports, and there is an order to them, as we'll see, because they parallel these other two lines here. This one here, the muscle composition, and this one here, the energy sources. That's part two. Oh, and while I'm here, if those who already know about this say, hey, that's not quite right, that is true. Fat does not feed into glycogen. This has been put in line here because this is the order in which your body resorts to the various fuel sources. You burn your phosphocreatine, and then your glucose, and then your glycogen, and then you're down to running on fat. So that's the sequence. Just remember that this does not mean that this does not mean that fat is broken down to glycogen. Now, historically, I'm going back 50 odd years. Historically, sports training concentrated mostly on going further, faster. Right? You would get in the pool at the start of the season and you might be able to sprint for 30 metres at top speed, and then you would stop and have a good rest and then do another sprint. Tomorrow you might come into training and hope that you can sprint for 31 metres. Well, that's, I've trained like that. But as you'll see later, we found out there are better ways to do it. And Australia did fairly well in international composition because we had enough strong, healthy athletes and an environment that facilitated sport and recreation. We've got lots of fine weather and we've got beaches and, yeah. So we did fairly well up until then. And then 1976 happened. For emphasis, I'm going to put in a little sound file here. What happened in 1976? Australia returned from the Montreal, Canada Olympic Games with no gold medals in any sport. The norms, that is the armchair athletes, were dismayed. They think, I pay good tax money to send representative teams overseas, and how come we're not getting anything for it? I I remember back, I was about 21 years old at the time and watching a little bit of this on television and getting some impression that something wasn't going very well. The commentators were making the best of it. I have to jump forward another 20 odd years to when I did the coaching course, and they tell us about what happened in 1976, and it was bad. So yeah, norms, dear me. So what had happened? Well, investigations were made and nothing had happened. The preparations had been as normal. The team had been as good as any we'd ever sent away. How did we get done? Well, what had happened was the rest of the world had caught up and overtaken us. Sports training had become highly technical. There's a lot of science in it now. Just following your gut feelings wasn't going to be good enough. So going further, faster, no longer quite good enough. So that happened there was one of the motivations to establish the Australian Institute of Sport. Coaches of Olympic sports would be encouraged to achieve some sort of qualification. So the information we were getting for the rest from the rest of the world, we had to try to take that on board and disseminate it to all our sports coaches. And I've made a little asterisk here, which is worth remembering, that rugby league was bypassed because rugby league's not an Olympic sport. This is why swim coaches or squad trainers have to try to explain to the rugby league players that swimming is different. It all gets very interesting. I should mention that's the coaching manual that I received when I studied the level 1 coaching course, as it was called, back in 1999. And let me tell you, nothing has changed. Nothing has really changed. They had everything in there at that time. There's been no radical development since then. Now we look inside the manual, and here is it, Chapter 6, Physiology of Swimming. Now the whole physiology section of the course covers about 10 pages of dense text interspersed with biochemical terminology and is delivered in about an hour and a half. So we start the day, with the information I told you about 1976 being the foundation of all this. And then there's an important part that talks about the principles. There are 4 principles, and I talk about those elsewhere, and I keep forgetting a couple of them. That's not what this is about. And then we go into how the strokes are performed as in terms of quality technique. You know, you come up out of Learn to Swim with ordinary technique. If you want to be a successful competitive swimmer, you need what I call quality technique. And this is where they'll teach you things about, very simply, streamlining, sculling, rotation, those sorts of things. All about technique. That's not what this video is about. That's another one. So it's delivered in about an hour and a half. And now that technique takes you up to about morning tea time, and most people there have been swimmers of some sort, and that's all fairly familiar to them. Now from then up until lunchtime, hour and a half. Physiology, and I'll tell you now, I could diverge onto why what the motives are for various people studying the coaching course, but I don't have time for that. Just let me say that regardless of what they thought they were going to do, after an hour and a half of this stuff, we all stumble out of it with blank faces and eyes glazed over and mind in overload. And I have to tell you that this went over my head the first time round, even though I had some familiarity with biochemistry. And it took me another 10 years until I did the a home study course on physiology, which expanded on this a lot. And then another 2 years after that before I realised that I could try to make it intelligible. Up until then, I was watching the head coach write sessions off the top of his head and thinking to myself, I'm never going to understand this. But I think you can. So that's the book, as you can see, text. And someone standing up there basically talking about that is not much better. So this is why I'm doing this. I'm trying to make it intelligible. Now, this is part 1. Part 2 is a separate video. Part 1 is going to be about the muscle composition, and it's covered by just one page in the manual. It's easily overlooked, as I've noted here, with deleterious consequences for many athletes, and you'll see why shortly. Now, methods. I would be aware of 4 main ways to determine the aptitude of an athlete in terms of muscle composition, and I've put these here in order of reliability. So the first one, the best one, is a micrographic scan of muscle biopsy. It is invasive and it's very specialised. If you go to the Australian Institute of Sport, you may get this done. They'll punch out a little biopsy, a little chunk of muscle, and they'll scan it underneath a microscope, and they'll count the number of white fibres to red fibres. Here we are, next slide. This is about what it looks like. I'll just go in here. Here you can see little red fibres and white fibres, and as it explains here, the white fibres are your fast twitch muscle fibres, and those are used for, and sprinters have a predominance of those. If you have a predominance of red slow twitch fibres, those are your endurance athletes. Now, I got a little bit confused when I came back to this. Look, I developed this about 5 years ago, and then the sky fell in on me, and I'm only just getting back to it. And I noticed this. I think, what? Intermediate muscle fibre. I've never heard of those. I've heard of red, I've heard of white. I still doubt if there's such a thing as an intermediate muscle fibre. Just leave that hanging in the air. Now, muscle composition. There's a lot crowded onto this slide. Muscle composition is genetically determined. It tends to run in families. It's genetically determined. You've got it for life. You're born with it. It stays with you. You cannot change it. It conforms in terms of distribution between amongst a population. It conforms to a normal distribution. So if you take a big crowd of people, you find that there's a big heap of them here in the middle. They've got fairly balanced distribution of muscle fibre between red and white, about half of each. And there are fewer and fewer people who have got these aptitudes out on the end. I'll just complete this. I've noted training can improve performance for any distance. You can take a general purpose athlete and subject them to sprint training and you'll improve their sprint performance. But as I've noted here, muscle composition cannot be changed. And this is what the amateurs get wrong, Nathan. Think that sprinting is the pinnacle of athletic performance. We'll give them all sprint training and we'll see how many we can get up here. Well, you can't. You can improve your performance at any distance. Muscle composition cannot be changed. You can take one of these and subject them to intense sprint training. When it gets into competition, you come up against one of these who are born sprinters, you are not going to get a gold medal. These can beat you hardly even trying. So it's best to stay at whatever you're train for whatever your aptitude is. If you're a sprinter, by all means do sprint training. If you're a general purpose athlete, you're going to have to do sort of a bit of everything. If you're an endurance athlete, you've got no choice but to do lots and lots of long distance training. Now I'm almost getting lost here. The next thing to point out is the numbers here. If you've got, say, 100 athletes and you find out what their muscle composition is, about 94% of them have what we call general purpose muscles. That ranges from about 40% white fibre and 60% red to 60% white fibre and 40% red. They're all in here. About 3% or one swimmer in 30 will be greater than 60% white fibre, and they're your born sprinters. And up this end, another 1 in 30 will have greater than 60% red fibre, and those are very talented. Those are your distance swimmers. Now, as I've noted here, look, the swimmers and the spectators get all very excited to watch fast, short distance races. Any sport, it's the same. These are the adrenaline junkies. You get a big hit of adrenaline, and it makes you feel excited. So that's your reward for doing this. Now, what they don't realise is that these up here, they have their own reward system. I seem to remember, what is it? If I could push myself through 500 metres, and I'm trying to remember what that is, that's about 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes of swimming continuously. Then, the muscles and the joints feel painful and you feel exhausted. But then what happens is the body realises that this effort is going on for an extended length of time and starts to release other hormones. Adrenaline. I'm not allowed to say adrenaline. That's been copyrighted or patented, whatever they do. That's some form of sports footwear or something. So we have to call it epinephrine, is the medical term for it, epinephrine. And these, once your body says, right, we're going on for a long time here, it releases noradrenaline, which is a slightly different hormone, and it's the one that masks pain and causes the body to go on to different fuel systems so that you can keep going. And I've noted here, you might have heard of a thing called runner's high. If you've got people jogging around the city, you can go into a slightly detached, euphoric sort of a feel. And these have been known to run right through intersections without watching for traffic. That's a bit risky. But that's what it's like. This is the reward system for someone doing distance exercise. Now, here's the thing that I'm really grizzly about. Locally here we've had our swimming pool for over 60 years. And I estimate that over that time there would have been about 70 people who have been through the swimming club here who would have been talented as endurance athletes. But because they were never identified and they were never trained for it, and their competition opportunities are rare, they get overlooked. And so you'd hear them saying things like, I liked swimming, but I was no good at it. What they actually mean is they liked swimming, but they were no good at sprinting. So there they are. They've gone through they've been to swim training for all their school years and then given it away and spent their whole life believing they were no good at it, when actually they were quite talented. If they'd been identified and trained for it and given opportunities, they could have been quite outstanding they could have been as outstanding as these. It's sad. I think that's about everything. Yeah, amateurs get this wrong. They believe they can turn anyone into a sprinter. Well, you can't. The second method here, a jump test. It's quick, easy and fairly accurate. I reckon every sporting club should do that. Well, swimmers in particular. Yeah, okay. We'll do this next. How to do a jump test. So your starting position is you're standing on the ground. Now there's a reason for doing this. You've got a measuring board here and you reach up as high as you can standing on the ground. And then here we are. I've repeated, most people, 90-odd%, general purpose athletes, can jump straight up from a standing jump about as high as their knees. So here we are. Here's the athlete's knee height. It's been repeated up here on your measuring board above where they can reach up. Right, next slide. The jump test. What you do is you jump vertically as high as you can reach. Now, the reason we put the measuring board up here is if you jump and you're measuring from the ground, there's a temptation to bend at the hips and the knees to try to get your toes up as high as you can, and that'll give you a false reading. So this is why we measure from the tops of the fingers. Now, jump vertically as high as you can reach. Sprinters, which are predominantly wide fibre, will jump significantly higher than knee height. Stayers, that's your endurance athletes, somewhat less. So here we are. He's done his standing jump. His knee height here, and if he got to there, that's a general purpose athlete. He's jumped a little bit higher than that, so he's got some sprint aptitude. Anyone who can't get up to knee height will be an endurance athlete. There's no one thing better. Higher is not better. Higher is not better. This is about identifying your aptitude. So you can practice this and get better at it, but it'll tend to give you a false determination. Because this is a single effort, how strong you are, how fit you are, doesn't have a lot to do with it. It's about how quickly your muscles can snap. That's the key to it. So, an activity here. I prepared this for another purpose. So we were supposed to have activities and quizzes and things like that. So the question is the athlete a general purpose, a sprinter or an endurance? And he's jumped a bit higher than knee height, so he's got some sprint aptitude. Now, as I've noted here, footballers would be familiar with this test. They use it to find out who to train as wingers. You want a sprinter out on the wing, if they get the ball, they can pelt along the length of the sideline and score a try is the intention. It's no good putting an endurance athlete out on the wing, they'll get caught. And I've just noted in small print here, an experienced coach, swimming coach, could identify them by the way they snap off the blocks at the start of a race. So the ones that are really quick in responding to the start signal and they jump out further and quicker than the others, those could have some sprint aptitude. The ones that just plop into the water, those could be your endurance athlete if you want to train them for long distance. The other thing that I've noticed is you can watch the kids doing cartwheels out on the grass before club night. The ones that can do aerials may have a bit of sprint aptitude. Your distance swimmers can barely flop over trying to do a cartwheel. This one here, mathematical analysis of times for a range of distances. This is very tedious. This is going to take us a while, and to do this properly really requires a presentation of its own. Right, what you do here, just for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to line up 3 swimmers who all do 100 metres in 66 seconds, or 1:06. I suppose that's maybe one of your senior swimmers for a local club, sort of an 11-year-old for an elite squad. 66. Now, I haven't mentioned it here. Yeah, that's all right. We'll get to it. The green line here is your general purpose athletes. Black represents the sprinters. Red, predictably, is the endurance athletes. They're the ones with the red fibre. I didn't know how to represent white for white fibre on here, so I've used black. So we've made this balance point here, the 100-metre event, and they all do 100 metres in 66 seconds. That's to make the arithmetic easy. Now, you can only apply these methods if the swimmer is substantially fit. Normally, to do this fairly easily without the help of a computer or very much calculation, a general purpose athlete, their time will double every time you double the distance. So if we're going 50 to 100, it'll, we'll see this. So if every time you double the distance, the time they take goes up by a factor of 2.2, those are your general purpose athletes. But what I wanted to show here was if that factor remains constant, then they're substantially fit. They are fit. But if that factor changes, if it goes up with distance, those are not fit, and that's the only thing you can determine from this, is that they're not fit. You can't tell whether they're general purpose or sprinters or endurance. You can't take that any further. So here is the trend for a general purpose swimmer. A general purpose swimmer who can swim 100 metres in 66 seconds, if you divide that by 2.2, they can be expected to do 50 metres in 30 seconds. And going up this way, multiply that by 2.2, we're up to 145 seconds for a 200. What's that? A 125. Okay. That's what you can expect for a general purpose swimmer. A sprinter, the black line, who can sprint 100 metres in 66 seconds. They'll do their 50 in something less than 30 seconds. They might do a 29 or a 28, something, even a 27. But once they've done 50 metres, they're done. They don't have the red fibre to keep going at much pace, and so they'll be going slower than the others after the 100 metre mark. they might do 200 in something like I've noted here, 152 seconds. What's that? 2 minutes 32. 2.3. Yeah, their factor will be 2. Their factor here will be 2.3, 2.4 with each doubling of distance. An endurance athlete who can swim 100 metres in 66 seconds. They can't generate much speed even at short distances, and so they can't get down to 30. They'll be just above 30. They might do 50 metres in 31, and that's the best they can do. But once they pass the 100 metre mark, they maintain speed because they've got this red fibre. They might do a 200 in, what have I got there, 139, 2 minutes 19, something like that. So you can see they are talented. We'll see this later if I do the race animation. You'll see what this does in practice. I'll exit. I'll include the race animation in the video, all being well. So what I've noted here to say, GP, general purpose athletes, are all in the same boat. That great big, I'll go back here. This great big block here in the middle. That's what most of us are. 90% of us are all in the same boat here. We're all general purpose athletes. Now I'll find my way back again. There it is. All in the same boat. 90% of us are suited to the 100 and 200 metre races. It's no use trying to take on the sprinters at short distance races. It's no use trying to take on the endurance athletes at long distance races. So we're all in the same boat there, where strength, fitness, technique, nutrition, health and other circumstances, support you get from your family, your club, how you're getting along with your school teacher and your coach, all that sort of thing. For age group swimmers, yeah, I'll get to that. For age group swimmers, there's something else happening there. Here's a little animation of a swimming race. Watch the progress of the sprinters, general purpose and endurance athletes over a 200 metre swim. You'll notice that the 100 metre distance is the balance point. This represents an 8-lane 50 metre swimming pool. And we're lining up 8 swimmers. We've got 4 general purpose swimmers in the middle. The 2 in white up the top represent our sprinters, and the 2 in red down the bottom represent our endurance athletes. Now, we fire the start signal and away they go. And at the first 25 metres, as predictable, the sprinters are out in front and the endurance athletes can't generate that much pace over short distances. Here, the sprinters predictably get to the 50 metre mark first. Now we'll work through the turn. The general purpose hit the wall, the sprinters are on their way back. The endurance swimmers get there last, the sprinters are well on their way back. Now watch what happens. 75 metre mark. You see, the sprinters were done at the end of that first length. Now they don't have enough red fibre to maintain pace over any longer distance. So everyone else is catching up, and even the endurance swimmers are gaining ground. And here's what happens by the time you get to the end of 100 metres. That's identical to the original slide. Everyone's either caught up or fallen back. Let's, out of curiosity, just run them over another 2 lengths and see what happens. 150 metre mark. Look who's got to the turn first. It's the endurance athletes this time. Sprinters are falling behind. Let's watch what happens for the next 50 metres. Oh, sorry, going to the turn. And another 50 metres back to the finish. Look who's got to the finish first. It's the endurance athletes. They're the ones who've got the red fibre to maintain a quite good pace over a very long distance. These sprinters here, they really should have stuck to the short distance races. And fourth down the list, and this is the least reliable, is to line them up and run them off in short distance races. That is least reliable because there are too many other variables. That is what most amateur squad trainers will do to try to pick out their best sprinters or see how their training's bringing the others along as sprinters. As above, strength, fitness, technique, and also for your age group swimmers, development for age. I've got a vivid memory of a 12-year-old who was setting records all over the place. He had an adult physique at 12 years old. He was head and shoulders above everyone else in his age group. His technique was the scrappiest I've ever seen at a championship meet. But because he was basically an adult at 12 years old, he was setting records. But that's extremely rare. Don't think that you could copy what he was doing and get the same results. Not a hope. Okay, so I'm returning to this. This is where we started. The objective was to explain this spectrum of sports in terms of, in this video, in terms of muscle composition. Oh yes, there it is, the muscle composition. We're going to talk about fuel sources in another one. I haven't explained all these, or have I? I haven't. Right. Time to do that. Time to expand on that. So this progresses across here. I should point out before I go any further, this diagram has not been updated. The proportions do not go from 0 to 100. They likely go from 60 to 40. So I ran those right out to 0, and I shouldn't have. There should still be about 40% of red fibre in those, and there should still be about 40% of white fibre in those. I've done that somewhere else, but not here. These are your single effort sports. These are over in, about 5 seconds, 10 seconds at the most. And you do that whole thing on, you need a very high predominance of white fibre, and the effort is over just running on phosphocreatine. There's a high jumper. I put a weightlifter there, and then I thought, well, if that's a snatch, then yes. Other athletes in this range would be things like hammer throwers and the like. These are where all the problems are. Problems come from when we're trying to get them to swim. In the off-season, they play these popular ball sports, which are these, I call them intermittent action sports. They're stop-start sports. You get the ball, you go for a little sprint, you pass the ball, and you jog around following play and recovering. That's not the sort of thing you do in these continuous action sports. From here on up, I call these continuous action sports. Swimmers are in there with the track runners and the velodrome cyclists. You just have to keep going. They offer a range of distances, so you can have any of this kind of muscle composition and go in these sports as long as you train for whatever your muscle composition is. Here are the sprinters, and here are the endurance athletes. Here are your 100 and 200 metre swimmers. And I love to point out here, I picked this for a reason. There's a butterfly swimmer. Halfway through their recovery stroke, the arms are in line with the shoulders. And this is what you should notice. By then the head is back down in line with the spine. The elbows are straight. The little fingers are up. They are leading forward with their wrist or their knuckles, and that's what you should see at that stage. Contrast that with what a lot of swimmers do. They go along with their head up too much, which means the legs are dragging, causing too much drag. And the other thing that they do is they do their propulsion stroke, and back here they'll swivel the arms around so the hands are flat so they don't drag in the water, and that tends to cause them to bend the elbows and drop the arms in short. You see this a lot in the younger age group swimmers. With that little rant done, now to complete this series, further to the right over here you'll see a marathon runner, some open water swimmers. Marathon athletes usually complete their event on glycogen. Further over here, I'm guessing that's an ultramarathon athlete. They might be swimming the English Channel, something like that. They will have to train themselves to run on fat, and all of these need a very high proportion of red slow twitch muscle fibre. Moving on. Yes, I've got more disparaging things to say about this in the next video. A fill-in activity time for me. As I said, this was for a training video. Think of some other sport or physical activity. What muscle composition would favour it? And some could be tricky, you know. You think, I don't know how to rate someone who might be into archery, or wrestling. Well, don't ask me about those. How about this one? In my range of illustrations of representative sports there, I wanted to put this one in, but I ran out of space. So there we are. There's some cycling road races. Have a think about what sort of muscle composition would favour them. So the outcome is done. I believe I've succeeded in describing how muscle composition selects various kinds of sports and what kind of distances swimmers should aim for depending on their muscle composition. So I believe I've done the best I can at explaining that. So what's the future? I've said here, not optimistic. Despite this information being available since about 1980, I do not see much of it being applied. In fact, it is misunderstood. They either haven't learned it, or they've overlooked it, or misunderstood it. Amateur squad trainers keep turning the clock back to before 1976. This is the further, faster era, and claiming that it has all changed, this is better now. Well, I can understand why they've said that, because in 1976, most of that, if they were born in 1976, they'd be 50 years old by now, and there are not very many parents around with young swimmers who were even alive in 1976. So when they discover this further, faster training, they think this is better. We don't have to know all this complicated stuff. I'm afraid it'll get you some way there, but it won't get you up into the finals at national titles. Not a chance. Outcome, future, feedback. Again, this was for training. If you're watching this as a YouTube video, well, put your feedback, comments and questions in the comments section. And thank you for your attention.